Welcome back to another volume of truly disturbing tales from Reddit. Today we're going to be narrating 3 new unsettling stories, taken directly from the platform. I encourage you all to sit back, grab a snack, and enjoy these terrifying personal accounts. Now, without any further delay, let's jump right in. This story happened to me rather recently, and I feel like this community will enjoy hearing about it. So my boyfriend and I are currently hiking in the Pacific Crest Trail in California. It's extremely common to catch rides along the trail, what some may call hitchhiking. Most people who live in towns bordering the trail are fairly kind, safe-seeming folk, but my emphasis on the seeming part. Well, we found ourselves a little lost after trying to take a less traveled alternative trail to avoid the snow-covered main trail. After lots of struggle and practically bushwhacking, we made our way down the hill and accidentally ended up on someone's property. Now this property is big. It's an extremely large ranch with a few different buildings visible. We tried to skedaddle as fast as possible off of the property, but one of the ranch dogs saw us and the owner came up in a golf cart. He was a burly man from what I could see, tall and grizzled, looked like a typical example of a California cowboy, wearing an oversized flannel and tattered jeans along with his worker's boots. Nothing here appeared to stand out as shady. I explained that we accidentally got lost hiking, apologized, and he said that it happens often, and he was super understanding about the whole situation. He asked if we wanted to ride into town, since he was about to leave anyway. Given how common hitching is on trail, and how nice he was, we accepted, and he drove us right to town. On the ride there, he told us he used to be in the DEA and had participated in more shootouts than people fighting in the army. Weird thing to mention, but okay, I guess we didn't think much of it. I noticed my boyfriend was really quiet throughout and thought that that was odd as well. As soon as we hop out of the car, my boyfriend grabs our backpacks and tells me to check my phone. He had sent me an article about the guy we just got a ride from, and how this guy was involved in his girlfriend's disappearance a few years back, including a suspicious death on the ranch property not too long after. Apparently, his girlfriend went missing 2 weeks after signing property transfers of her ranch over to him. She was never found, and the suspicious death on the ranch was a worker who got killed by an ATV, but toxicology showed that it was a meth overdose. Given his DEA background, I found that part specifically suspicious. Also, after a little bit more digging, we found that that man was on a certain registry for groping 2 women on a snowmobile tour that happened to eclipse his property. Wild times on the Pacific Crest Trail. My boyfriend and I are 100% okay, but still shaken to this day the fact that we got a hitch from a possible murderer. And after reading the information we did, I think he did it. And while I'm sure that you get the idea, and this probably goes without saying, be careful who you get rides from, even if they're friendly. This happened to me 2 summers back, while I was house sitting out in California for an older couple I had met at a conference for work. It had seemed like a dream scenario. The couple wanted a vacation in Hawaii for 2 weeks, but didn't want to board their cats, and I had been chatting with them about wanting to visit California again, where they happened to live, because I had loved it the first time I had gone, and we figured that we could mutually benefit if I came out and house sat for them. So I flew out. They showed me around for a few days, taught me how to care for the cats. 2 of them. One was a typical house cat, personable to a degree, but otherwise independent and wanting to be left alone. The other, extremely shy, and one that I barely saw, which will actually be an important detail for later. They showed me their houseplants, told me when to water them, gave me access to their house and cars. These people were really generous, actually. And before I knew it, I had dropped them off at the airport and was on my own. At first, it was really the dream vacation. I was staying in Oakland, making my own adventures by crossing the bridge into San Francisco, Sonoma for the wine country, down to Monterey for views of the ocean, things like that. In the mornings, I could walk out the front door and shortly be hiking the paths surrounding nearby Mount Diablo, as I was just ultra content with the world at that time. I was so enamored by the area that I had actually started looking into taking some steps to move out there even. But then one day, about halfway through my final week there, when I got back to the house, I had this really odd feeling that I just couldn't shake, almost like I shouldn't head inside. I did shake it off, went inside anyway because it was getting late and I needed to put out dinner for the cats. Once I was inside though, I forced myself to ignore how off I felt, made some food for myself, went to bed, and was shocked to find the shy cat hiding under my bed and crying out. This was the first time I had even seen her up close. The entire time I had been there, up to that point, she never left my host's bedroom unless she didn't realize that I was around. Again, I ignored that weird feeling and just assumed that she had decided I was okay and went to bed. I did start locking my bedroom door that night though. I also remember that about halfway through that night, I thought I heard someone walking around in the gravel outside of my window. But after listening for a bit, I didn't hear anything else and just drifted back to sleep. The day after, in the morning, I still felt a little odd but kept up with my plans for the day. I drove out to a little music festival in Sonoma and went clothes shopping. Had an overall great day in my approximation. When I got back to the house though, I found the front door locked in a way that I hadn't left it. Basically, my host never locked the deadbolt, only the lower second lock, and that's the only lock my key worked on, so I never messed with the deadbolt, but it was certainly locked. So I had to call my hosts and find the hide-a key, which, to their credit, safety-wise, was buried like a whole foot underneath a bush outside, and it had definitely not been unearthed for a long time. So I used that, went inside, and kept the key with me just in case it happened again. And wouldn't you know, it did, but with a different door this time. I'd stepped out into the garage to get a drink, and when I turned around to go back inside the house, the door had shut and was now locked. I could use my normal key on the door, but I was still pretty bewildered. My own cats are whack, so I think in my mind I was trying to come up with a way that these cats could be locking me out of the house. But even at my most creative, I was coming up empty. I decided I must have been misunderstanding how the locks worked, and just wrote it off and started checking, double checking, and triple checking locks when I went out of the house or into the garage. That night when I went to bed, that really awful feeling of unease was still there, and so was the shy cat under my bed, who was clearly unhappy to see me but also wouldn't leave my side. But again, I just locked my bedroom door and fell asleep. The next morning, I felt awful. Nausea, body ache, no desire to leave the house, so I decided to stay in and Netflix for the day. This vacation stay was like a full 2 weeks, so I didn't feel like I was in any hurry to get all my touristy things done. But as the day went on, I started to feel the feeling of wrongness again, and it morphed into feeling incredibly watched. Around mid-afternoon, it got to the point that I was so uneasy that, even feeling awful, I decided to get out of the house for a bit to shake it off. I was getting a bit low on food, so I went to the grocery store and bought a couple of items that I didn't think would hurt my stomach. As I began to leave the checkout area, the cashier said the generic, "Have a great evening," and I just instantly started crying, shocking myself and the poor cashier because I had just had this intrusive thought that said, "You might be the last person to ever say that to me." When I got to my car, I was still crying, and my entire body was telling me not to drive back to the house. I couldn't not, though. I didn't want to neglect the cats, so I drove back, parked in the driveway, and convinced myself after about half an hour of hyping to just go open the front door. Once I did that, I thought I would get over it and be able to go in and at least feed the cats. Then maybe I'd go get a hotel room after, but my body physically would not let me inside. It was like I was stuck in the entryway. I then made a deal with myself. I would yell into the house saying I had already called the police and that they were on their way. In panic logic, I figured that would make anyone in the house leave. So I faced the inside, looking down the hallway towards the bedrooms, and I did just that. The second I had finished saying, "They're almost here, so if you want to avoid being arrested, you need to leave now," the light in my host's room turned on, and I heard some banging. I immediately hightailed it back to the car, called the police for real this time, and proceeded to have a mental breakdown while talking to the dispatcher. Once they got there, they checked the house but didn't find a soul. But the double doors in my host's bedroom were left wide open, and there was a pile of food wrappers in the corner behind the blinds, so they said it looked like someone had been there. What makes it so scary to me is that nothing was taken, and that based on the shape of the house, that would have been the perfect vantage point to see me in the living room as I stayed home sick. To explain this, the house was in an L shape, and from the windows into the garden that were in my host's bedroom, you could see into the living room, absolutely unencumbered. Also, the minute the police were gone, the shy cat was right back in my host's bedroom, and I didn't see her again until I left to go back home several days later. So basically, I think the intruder had been there at least 2 days, forcing the cat to choose between two strangers and leading her to choose the one that was at least a little less strange. It messed me up pretty badly, especially because they didn't catch the person, and truly they didn't seem to have the desire to look. I still had 3 extra days in that house from that point. Nothing else odd happened, and I didn't feel anything off the rest of the time I was there, but the damage was done. I've never felt completely safe in a home without doing a complete search before bed since. But I am extremely glad my gut spoke up. I guess I'd rather have some residual anxiety than whatever the alternative is. So whoever was in my host's house for at least a few days with me, watching me, let's please never meet. I remember back to when I was 15 or 16, I used to sneak over to my boyfriend's house, who lived around the block from me. I wasn't allowed to date him at that time because family drama, crazy stepdad and all. I remember leaving his house one evening to go meet up with friends. It's summertime in the Midwest, maybe about 7 p.m. Still light out, but the sun is definitely beginning to set. In my town, a bunch of kids would meet at this convenience store that was more or less in the middle of our tiny town. It was a super cute town, by the way. All the houses looked the same, bungalow style. Trees lined the nicely manicured lawns, and no matter where you are, you know someone that lives on a street or two away. Well, I was walking maybe 5 blocks away from my destination, and I was alone. I remember crossing the street and seeing a young man emerge from one of the streets perpendicular from where I'm crossing. As my foot hits the sidewalk, this puts us on opposite sides of the street, of the same block. We're now walking in the same direction, me about 50 yards ahead of him on the right side of the street, him trailing me on the left side of the street. Although we're the only two on this stretch of road, it's not weird necessarily, but my Nana always taught me to be suspicious of pretty much everyone. Yeah, I know it's not a healthy way to be, but this is what generational trauma does to a person. I glance over my shoulder a few times, making sure that he's aware that I'm aware that he's there. I do this out of habit, as I stay on my way, not really concerned at this point. But a block later, he crosses the street. I hear his footsteps begin to speed up as he does, going from a walk much closer to a run. I can't describe how or why, but this is when all my senses went to high alert. I take another look over my shoulder, and the distance between us has shrunk from 50 yards down to no more than 10. He's close enough that I can pretty much see all of his features. His shabby build, his pointy nose, his medium-length, greasy-looking hair. But what really struck fear into me was the look of his cold, dark eyes beaming right at me. I feel like this is when I should tell you that I'm not even 5 feet tall, and at this point in my life, I was well under 100 pounds. Tiny, you could say. So at this point, I grab my phone and pretend to call someone, yelling so he can hear me. "I'm coming up the stairs right now. Will you open the door for me?" Hurriedly, obviously panicked, I dart up some random person's stairs to their front door. When I look back once more, he was right at the base of the stairs where the sidewalk meets the property. He didn't say a word, but his eyes and the entire look on his face screamed, "F you." This telekinetic message only lasted a moment, but it lingered far longer as he paused where he was before continuing to walk away. I crept down the stairs and snuck behind some bushes, peering back and forth to see if he was gone. Once I was sure that he had, I called my boyfriend and ran the last few blocks to meet up with my friends. Maybe it was nothing, but my gut has always told me differently. I still remember that guy's face, and from time to time, I watch the news, wondering if I'll see that face cross the screen, possibly for committing a crime against somebody else. Hasn't happened just yet, but I always find myself wondering. And while that part of me will always wonder, there's a larger part of me that hopes that I never see that man's face ever again.